Okay, thank you, Kena. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here to tell a story. I love stories, and for me, storytelling is a very easy way to get the message across because growing up, I always remember, and I tell this story a lot. I remember how my grandmom always sat us down and told us stories of, the past. I know a bit more than a number of people who come from where I'm from because I listen to stories, and I remember my dad also did the same to the point that stories that were told in my local dialect he had on radio cassettes and brought home, and that's how I learned a lot about some of my culture that I don't know if I find in any books. So storytelling for me is that. How does storytelling impact on my work? I think all of my work is all about the stories that have happened. Even the way I started my business is a story in itself, and it's a story that like Ikenna said. For me, it's all about relating my life experiences to the things that I do, and because I do this because I feel people will not listen to you, and I'm not deliberately doing it. I just have that empathy to feel that how do I tell you something that's hanging in the air if I do not tell you how it really is? You will never get it, right? So for me, working in these communities, storytelling has been a fantastic tool of getting the message across because one of the things I learned very early in my work is going to a community, setting up a projector and doing a PowerPoint presentation, interjecting it with videos of real life situations across the borders was very exciting for the people. When they watch it, when they see you give the stories and you speak their local language, that just opens up their hearts to you. And the fact that when I work because I want more women to work, do the kind of work that I'm doing. I want more women to be involved because I feel that it's with the situation that we are in especially northern Nigeria, if the women do not play an active role, then a lot of things will continue being lopsided and there will not be a sustainable growth. And so it's always nice for me when I go to these rural communities in northern Nigeria and as a female, a woman speaking and talking in their language, and I'm telling them, bring your wives, bring your sisters, let's have conversations with them. It's easier. That opens a lot of doors for them. And that allows them to feel, to relate with whatever it is that I'm saying because they know that I feel them. I know what they are saying, and I'm able to communicate it because this is what I have experienced, and this is how I'm going to share it to you. Lastly, I'll just tell the story of how I started my business and why it's actually very, very pertinent to the way I do my work. I was lucky to be a co-founder to Developmental Association for Renewable Energies, and in the process, we started the first UNFCCC CDM project on cook stoves. And due to that, I was lucky to be at the Partnership for Clean Indoor Air forum in Uganda in 2009, not 20, 2009. And while there, I spoke on the panel, and the other lady who was speaking on the panel was sharing how exposure to indoor air pollution, which means cooking on an open fire using a kerosene lantern for 2 hours, meant you had smoked an equivalent of a pack of cigarettes. Okay, coming from a mother who used to own a mama put, we cooked on open fires by the light of a kerosene lantern. So I don't know how many packs of cigarette or boxes of cigarette me and my family had smoked and experienced. And that really touched me. And then when she listed the whole effects, the kind of health issues that could happen, some of them were breathing related. And I had just lost my sister in 2006 from a breathing related issue. So I was trying to find the connection, the correlation that this could be one thing that killed my sister. But it couldn't get out of my head. And I kept thinking, there has to be a solution. And I kept remembering the women I buy akara from when I'm going home in the evening who by the open fire, by the light of a kerosene, Achibalba. If you all know Achibalba, the way it billows smoke into the atmosphere. So this woman sits by Achibalba in front of an open fire, cooking. I don't know how many packs of cigarettes she smoked in her lifetime. And I just thought something had to be done. And you know how they say when the student is ready, the teacher appears, stepping out of the hall, there was barefoot power peddling solar lanterns. I mean, the first generation solar lanterns were like not really very bright, And I bought 10 of them and tried them out with the women in, those areas I spoke about. And that was just the beginning of how I started.
Okay, thank you, Habiba. Habiba, I'll come back to you. Let me go to Mr. Henry. Henry, you run an organization that's into communication, Green African Hub. Um, People would not demand for what they don't know, what they don't understand. Mr. Ken just made a presentation about Nigeria energy transition. What does that mean to Mama Puts or that woman that sells food? You know, and now we're talking about climate change. What does it mean? In 2020, over 270 people died in Benue State. And when the media first carried that story, they said our women, an abomination has happened, maybe incest. A man slept with his daughter and the God has visited the community. But by the time research was done, they realized that the community river was poisoned by endosulfan because farmers who were using those toxic chemicals never knew it was dangerous for the environment, for the water, and a whole lot of people died. So what role does storytelling, what role does research play? How can it be a viable tool for the Ministry of Environment, for instance? Our traditional leaders, a lot of them are supposed to be custodians and protectors of our culture. You know, there's a relationship between culture and the tree. That evil forest has been given to a church. That forest development planners have come to take it up. They want to build more estates. So what is the role? How essential is storytelling, understanding the narrative? Where does all of this fit in? And how can the government and these agencies, traditional leaders, religious leaders, the government, how can they do more and how should they do more in terms of using story, understanding the environment, and putting those connections together so that people could get better understanding and better play their own role as communities?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, now very profound question. Very, very. I mean, we can go into it and it will take a bit. So I'm going to try and be as short and sharp as possible. But before that, I'll just simply talk a bit about my background. So I've spent the last 25 years in communications at different levels, on the corporate side, on the agency side. And then I caught the fire for climate change while I was chief marketing officer at a bank. And all we used to do, because we had to submit sustainability reports to the CBN every year, is we would look at, our indices, how much water had we saved, how much paper did we use, and, bits and pieces here, and we'll submit that report to the central bank and would have ticked the box. But when I moved on, I realized there was much more that could be done. From a starter's perspective, I already, as CMO, had said the before and after storytelling technique was tired and boring, which is what the bank was doing at the time. So they would have cleanup exercises and they would basically say, this is what it was before, this is what it was now. And they would take pictures and they would splash the papers and you would say, yeah, they've done it. And then if they went the extra mile, it would be to count what was collected, from a documentation perspective. But just to focus on your question, the ultimate thing about storytelling is its authenticity. If it is not authentic, if you listen to Habiba talk from the bottom of her heart, from her own personal experience, then you can't quite contradict that conversation because it's what you've seen, touched, felt, experienced, and nobody can tell you a better story than that. So if you then begin to look at the entire stakeholder community with regards to how we would collaborate and partner, this job of telling authentic stories in the climate space is way too much for any one of us seated here, which is why this is an exciting platform for us to collaborate and tell the stories that will make people take climate action. Now, bringing it home to what we do at Green Hub Africa. So Green Hub Africa is an environmental sustainability, it's an NGO that focuses on three major things: education, advocacy, and media content dissemination. The education part is where we were able to, during COVID, identify that what the UN had done in New York when they launched what they call the Climate Action Superheroes, was something that wasn't going to resonate with our local markets. And again, listening to Habiba talk about how, it just has to speak to the local context. And even your question with regards to what happened in Benue when they thought it was the gods, and then they realized there were chemicals, and it's really then educating people, educating them to understand. But you educate them in their world. You educate them in the ways they will understand. And which is why, in talking about what we've done recently, this is what was launched with the UN here last year. It was the recontextualization of the climate action superheroes for Nigeria. And it literally looked at the 6 geopolitical zones. So the entire country is represented. And on top of that, you have everyone, superheroes with Nigerian names addressing the issues of, for example, if you look at the top, you see Abikesh dealing with the issues of desertification. There's Oche, who is dealing with the issues of food insecurity. There's Amina, who's dealing with renewable energy. There's Efe, who's dealing with water pollution. And I can go on and on and on. But just to focus on your question, it's really a case of ensuring that the communication is contextual and it connects with your target audience. Because once you do that, then you would have raised a movement that will become all the things that our keynote speaker was talking about much earlier. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So let's go down to EnvironNews. Unfortunately, Simire Michael had an emergency this morning, but he sent his able colleague, Mr. Ajibode. So if you're in the climate space sector, environment sector, and you're not subscribed to EnvironNews, you're on a long thing. Very, very long thing. So let's get to EnvironNews. So the first question would be, that's from what Mr. Michael said. The story has to be correct, and a lot of environmental reports, studies are high tech. I mean, for instance, the map that Mr. Henry just showed us. You really need to know how to understand the map. When you put the two maps together, how do you break it down as an environmental journalist? EnvironNews, you've been on a lot of environmental issues. A lot of people are subscribed to EnvironNews. But as an environmental journalist, how do you break down those complex information in a simple way that people could really understand and just want to read the captions?
Good morning, everybody. For the record, my name is Ajibola Adedoyi. I'm here to represent my boss, who is unavoidably absent this morning. He has to be somewhere to attend to very pressing issue. And having said that, EnvironNews as a multimedia news platform, we make use of anything that has to do with multimedia, talk of video, photo, because we believe in Nigeria today, not everybody are educated, not everybody understands it, not everybody can read and write. But with aid of pictures, this can help go a long way in telling the story more than what we can even say. Like one of our freelancer, Mr. Mayowa Debote, who has do photo section. It goes to area they call Makoko in Lagos, where they used to cohabitate with water, and also an area in Ondo State, they call the place Ayetoro. Having been, even if you have not been to that place before, if you see the picture, you see how people are building their shelter on water. In fact, there they have ballet. Some people are living there, they've not even stayed on the mainland or any other place. They were born and brought up there. In fact, they have schools on that water. They do all sorts of things on the water, and this is the same water that they were drinking. So without you being there, you're not able to have this understanding of what's actually going on there. So that is the way we use multimedia in telling our stories. Because multimedia and art, they go like they were partners or they were related somehow. You can't leave one for the other. So this can go a long way in assisting us in telling our stories the more. And yes, what we are talking about today, it can tell our story. I mean, storytelling can go a long way in affecting climate action through dissertation and feature writing. So this can go a long way because there is need for people to learn and to get to know more about what the effect of climate change. There are so many people that they don't know that, okay, just drinking your sachet water and throw the plastic, the nylon into the ocean can constitute environmental hazard. So I don't know where exactly you want me to talk about right now, but talking about what my brother was saying about the last time about using the right language to explain certain things to people. My mother in the village or my grandma in the village were able to understand what they are calling climate change. So we try as much as possible to tell them in the language that they understand. Like everybody say, "Àyípadà ojú ọjọ́." That's literally what climate change means. So before you can say the story, for them to understand you very well, you have to go down, to their level, tell the story the way you understand. By so doing, we make the change that we actually desire.
All right, thank you very much. So he has said two major things. Use, break it down, pictography, visual. Back to you, Henry. Visual art. I've never ever seen a website of a local government in Nigeria. These government websites, it no go work. If you go to ministries, some of them I beg. I can't remember seeing any simple visual illustration, either from Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Water Resource. I've not seen any visual illustration for Ministry of Water Resource and safe water. I don't think I've seen it. If you don't know it's not bringing money, federal government is not doing it. Are these things rocket science and they too expensive? Why are we not taking advantages of this visual art technology as it comes? Why are we not taking advantage of these things, especially from the part of the government? Why are we not taking advantage of them as the tool to telling our stories?
Thank you. It's exciting to hear that question because I remember that in 2019, when Ring of Africa was starting out, all that was in my head, being a communicator, was to then begin to think of how we can amplify this conversation around climate change. So I thought one of the mediums that would be great would be the billboards. And so, based on relationships in the industry, I was working with LASA at different levels. So I just went to LASA and I said, "Hey, I'm no longer a banker, but I want to use your billboards." And I know the boards that Lagos State owns. So the conversation was, which of your boards will you give me to put messaging about climate change? And they said, brilliant idea, but we don't report to ourselves or report to the Ministry of Environment, and you'll need to get approval from them. So I went I didn't know anybody, and the guy saw me looking lost. So he said, "Why are you?" I said, "I don't know anyone in the Ministry of Environment." So he said, "Okay, I will send you to someone." And he sent me to someone. And God bless her, Mrs. Ronke Odene. She's no longer the Permanent Secretary. And she was the one I met. And she said, well, at that time, there was some changes going on. She would come back to me. And she did come back to me. And she came back, and we then were able to go out there and have our first beach cleanup and street cleanup. But like you rightly said, it was funded by a third party. And I just used my network to get a few of my banking friends there to say, "Hey, I want to do this cleanup in a beach, clean." And they gave me some money and we were able to do it. But that is the fundamental challenge. The government in itself, I don't know what it is, but there isn't a clear-cut budget that is there for this purpose. Or maybe it is there and it's not being used. But that is really, really one of the challenges that we're dealing with. The second thing is the use of professionals to communicate. So we are dealing with the digital age now where we have lots of content creators in the world and all over. But there are principles of communication where You know, my sister here is wearing a really nice dress that's red and everything. But there's a way you use red or black in communicating visually. And if you don't have that knowledge, you will have people who use it and they think it's nice, they think it works. But that's the difference between a Picasso painting and actual effective communication. Because what effective communication is supposed to make you do is to make you take climate action, is to make you take a decision. So you would look at the material and you will say this material lacks a call to action. So it's great, it's pretty, it's nice, brilliant colors used. There's no call to action that actually then makes you take that step. And that's what we do in marketing communications. When we're doing it, we're actually getting you to choose Coke over Pepsi. We're getting you to choose one brand over the other. And it's the same thing that you bring. The fundamental principles are the same. But it's a function of two things. Government recognizing the need to be able to use professionals to do what they need to do and making available in budget. At least from a government perspective, this is our contribution to the cause. And of course, there are many other things we can't do with our third-party donors who have been doing awesome work and would like to encourage them to keep doing it. But that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let me get to you, Habiba. Habiba, renewable energy adoption, lots of barriers, lots of challenges. The future of renewable energy. How do we, what will storytelling play in terms of removing or helping us navigate around the barriers and the future of renewable energy? Are we going to see more people adopting renewable energy because there's a change in the story? I mean, if you look at solar panels, you think solar panel, you think solar panel does not work. That used to be the story.
Yeah.
But that has changed now. Now most solar panel works, but there are still lots of barriers that we're facing along the renewable energy space. So what role do you think storytelling can play in terms of helping us navigate or overcome this barrier? And in the future, if we're going to have large scale 30% renewable energy in Nigeria's energy mix, what will be the central role for storytelling in all of this?
Okay, so in addressing that, I would also be to my personal story as well. I remember when I won the Global Leadership Award for Economic Empowerment, and that's when in that video you spoke about was created. And the reason why that video was created the way it was they needed to find a way to tell the story of my work. Unfortunately, at that time, the travel to northern Nigeria was restricted for Americans. And it's an American award because we received that in Washington. So the embassy advised against travel, and they really needed to tell the story of what I do. And the idea to just tell that story in that childlike way. And I hope Nasreen and Fatima can allow us to play. It's just a 3-minute video. Just came up. Let's make it a childlike thing. Let's do cartoons, and real life pictures were taken by a Nigerian amazing photographer who came all the way to Kaduna to do it. But it was able to pass what story? In the long run, by the end of the whole event that night, everybody could tell that renewable energy could actually make a difference in people's lives in Nigeria. And I remember in that Kennedy Hall that day, a lot of people came up to say this was by far the best story they had tonight. And I've used that video in several places just by not saying much, just to play that video and see that I get converts from non-renewable solutions to renewable energy solutions. Looking at the future, I mean, you're very correct. I remember when I started my work and when the renewable energy master plan was being developed, I said it on all of the meetings, and I was challenging our professor within that. How can we ensure that with all of the sunshine we have in northern Nigeria, most roofs are dotted by solar panels? And of course, at that time, people take offense easily, and it was a big fight. But I believe that it is the story of one convert who told the other person that, look, I have changed so that, and it is giving me X, Y, and Z, opportunities or solutions to my energy problem that make the next person become a convert as well. And this is just simply how life works. You sell by appealing to people's emotions and appealing to their easy mind, just relate with them. And that has made solar now, when you watch a lot of Nigerian movies, you see solar panels plotted on the roofs. And I think when I was watching the movie and I saw it, I said, "Hey, this is a waste now." Because ordinarily, people are watching that movie and maybe somebody has been toasting them to, have solar on their roofs and was not even, paying attention to it. Just by watching that movie and seeing that solar panel, that already creates some sort of, I want to adopt as well. So I would also advise that in these telling stories, even in our movie industry, let's tell more stories that relate to adoption of clean fuels in future. Let's somehow find a way to interweave it. There's a series I also watched and I saw and I heard the lady saying, "Oh, where's your husband?" He went for one of these renewable energy conferences. He'll come back now and start preaching clean air, clean food. She has passed on the story, and that actually really held on to me. So I think these are the many ways that we can do this and ensure that this story is being passed on. These people are adopting more. People are, and before you know it, it becomes a big check, process, and people it just goes on and on and on. Yeah.
Mr. Chibola, let me come to you. Sometimes when I hear these climate change issues or when I hear my mentors that move us about climate change, sometimes at the end of it, he does this for climate change, he doesn't do it for food. But when he does it with climate change, I think after he sees it, sometimes I get scared. Like horror film, horror film, when they actively kill everybody. And then there's this one person that is like he has escaped. And then from afar, you want to be happy for him. And all of a sudden, you see that villain just throw that axe from far, shoot, 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 and he hits the person on the head and she dies. So, as a media person, is there a way that how do we communicate the severity of climate change? And I'm also passing that message to my mentor. How do we communicate the severity of climate change without dampening a hope? Because sometimes it looks like, well, this climate change is irreversible. This climate change, let's just forget it, or Jesus just come make this thing end. How do we balance the story between the severity of climate change and still showing there's hope? Yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you are trying to say. What really happened is you don't just sit and of stories. Go to the people, go straight to the people and talk to them as regard what they are facing. And again, we don't just write stories because apart from being a journalist, you don't just sit at the corner of your house or your room to say, okay, this is what you want to just come up. You have to go to the field, talk to the people. And you don't wait until there is this special day for to do something. All the social data are there. So that like the United Nations and stuff like that. You have to go and see what's actually happening. Like as I was coming to this morning, I passed through social media. The odor put out from that place is even something else entirely. You understand? So my concern is for the people around that area. What will happen to them next-wise? Saying in about 2-3 years from now. I'm only saying, you understand? So this is the type of story that we write. You don't wait till the damage is done. You go there, discuss with them, whatever they are facing and challenge. Now bring out solution to those problems. They might even be on suggesting what they feel should be the solution to the problem. So after the story, the government at the heads of affairs of the state or the country now say, okay, what are we going to do to ensure we don't actually experience like process or chaos the land. So we don't need to wait till the thing is done. We have to go to them and talk to them. And from there, now like more like discuss. Apart from that, we also talk to this civil society organization, the experts in the field. If people share their own experience or their own idea, what do you think government should do in solving that problem at the right time?
All right, thank you very much. Habiba, you want to add?
Say that you were trying to say, like, how do we marry that, it's urgent and it's there's hope kind of situation. I think it's also in telling the successful stories. I think it is intended in showing what has really happened out there in in the fact that Yes, it's bad, but there's hope.
Yeah.
When you build, like you show, let me use drought for example. You show a story of drought, how it kills people, and then at the end of it, just like you said, there's a call to action, right? You're also able to say, this is what a green land looks like. This is what you can do to help us get this green land. So there is hope as far as you exist. Just like the spoken word artist said earlier, it is beholden on each and every one of us to do something. And in doing something, it means that all of us are called to that action.
Alright.
And the ripple effect of this action happening, just like I said about seeing more roofs dotted with solar panel, is that a lot more people will, key into that. And you just have to tell that story of happening and even showing the true life, evidences of this having been done.
All right, thank you very much, Habiba. I'll ask a last question, just one, and Henry will take it. And that question is coming from Mr. Nimo's events. He organized an event, and part of that event, they cooked some traditional indigenous food, and then they asked us to eat. When we finished eating, he looked at all of us and said, "You see this food you're eating, in the next 5-6 years, you would not have this food again, because the forest would have been gone, everything would have been gone." And in this final, we're talking about storytelling. This is the last question after we understand about data and power. Where does storytelling have a role? What's the role of storytelling in sustaining that cultural essence in things like food, in things like forest, and then how do we make sure that the government, our government, and you're great like white people, how do they understand this cultural elements and fundamental and put it within their minds? So you have the best.
Thank you so much. Just to quickly touch on the very valid, and because that question you asked was extremely powerful. One word that we use at Green Hub Africa, because the doom side of the conversation is there and is glaring, but it's not for us to despair and lose hope, is the word edutainment. That's how Green Hub Africa has been able to distinguish itself. We use edutainment. So listen to that wonderful spoken word artist, that is edutainment. So you're listening to something and it's educating you. It is also entertaining you, but it leaves you thinking. I mean, look at the delivery of the spoken word artist. It was throwing up all sorts of visuals in my head. And that's the power of edutainment. And that is what you even see in what I was showing earlier when I described this. These are all our culture. And I'm saying this to come into the question that, of course, is a mentor to not only you, to me too, to all of us. And so I mean, he just did something that will leave you thinking. When you look at pop culture today, where does it sit in? It sits in fashion, it sits in cuisine, it sits in arts, it sits in sports, and he has used cuisine to arrest our attention. And I can imagine, please invite me next time so that I'll be part of that the food. But that session where you guys ate, and I can imagine how that food was really tasty and all of that. You finish salivating, and then you now hear, you won't have this in 5 years, you won't have this in 7 years. And you begin to say, how do we fix that? And that is the power of what she was describing, which is word of mouth. When you tell somebody to tell somebody to tell somebody, you believe that story more. And that's what we do in communications. We get you to own the story. So when you're telling the story, you're telling it from your perspective. And so, in summary, it's extremely important to be infusing our lifestyle, because the challenge with climate change and the solution to climate change is behavioral change. That is it. So if we change our behavior with how we treat the forest, if we change our behavior with how we consume things, you drink water and you fling the bottle, you're not waste separating, you're not, all these things, if we change the behavior, then we'll begin to see remarkable impact. But the goal is that many of us will leave this room today and become advocates and spread the word, because it's a numbers game. The more we reach people, the more we get converts, like you said, the more we win this battle. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.